This week, we will be discussing an individual's response to seeing those blue lights in your mirror, hearing the siren, and then how do you respond? And so when you see those blue lights, what should you do? Should you pull over immediately, or should you wait until there's a safer space to pull over?
You should always wait until there's a safe place to pull over. Stop as soon as practical is what we would advise you to do. When you don't stop as soon as practical, that's going to have the officer, he's going to put some antenna up and it's going to put him on edge. And it could lead to something like a felony evading charge. And when that situation happens, it's going to lead to the police officers getting out of the car, guns drawn, you being drugged out of the car, and make what is seemingly a citable offense or even a warning for a traffic ticket turn into some sort of felony charge. So you pull over as soon as practical. What should someone do when they're pulled over and stopped?
Yeah, so when you're pulled over and stopped, the officers are going to come up to your window. We always advise that you be respectful, be compliant, have your license and registration ready for the officers, have your hands visibly seen, no fast movement so that they're not concerned about their safety. At the end of the day, the officers don't know what's in your vehicle, so they can always ask you to get out of your vehicle because if you have guns, if you have weapons, they're not aware of any of that and they're going to be worried if anything's going to escalate. So even if you haven't done any sort of anything other than a traffic offense, they're still allowed to ask you out of the vehicle and you still have to get out of the vehicle. If you don't comply with that, then you can get a charge like resisting arrest or something similar.
So an officer can always claim officer safety to get someone out of the vehicle, but they may have an alternative reason to getting someone out. Andrew, do you want to talk about how we can prove that?
Yeah, so like Emily was talking about, an officer's always going to be able to get you out of this vehicle for officer safety reasons, right? So it's one that when we talk about it is always be compliant. But one of the reasons we're so attentive to body camera and dash cam is because there's going to be times where an officer says or does something that lets us know that his focus is not just on officer safety reasons. And when that applies to something like a DUI, that could be him getting you out of the car, just saying, okay, I'm already thinking I'm going to do field sobriety testing, or I'm going to request this PVT or whatnot, which ties into, has he met the standard of evidence for that, which for something like field sobriety, has he already got his reasonable suspicion, his clear and articulable facts? So while he can't always get you out of the car, it's one that's important for us as defense attorneys to look into it to see, hey, was it really for officer safety reasons, or is he jumping the gun and trying to go to the next phase in a DUI investigation?
At the end of the day, you want to comply with officers. It doesn't mean tell them everything, exactly as what happened. You have the right to remain silent. We do advise that you use that right. But as far as pulling over, as far as getting out of the vehicle, officers have the right to pull you over, potentially. They have the right to get you out of the vehicle, potentially. And so do those things, comply with the officer, because otherwise you may have additional charges such as felony evading arrest, like Dakota mentioned, or resisting arrest. You're also going to make it more difficult for us to negotiate with the district attorney's office. If you were not compliant, you made it difficult for the officer. They're not going to want to work with us as far as negotiations go. So be compliant with officers, because on the back end, when you hire a criminal defense attorney who knows what to look for, we can argue that the officer didn't have reasonable suspicion to pull you over. We can argue that the officer didn't have reasonable suspicion to prolong the stop to do field sobriety tests. But if you evade arrest, we can't argue against that. If you were speeding away from the officers, if you were resisting and not getting out of the vehicle and the officer had a lawful command to do so, we cannot do anything to defend you from that charge. You're making it more difficult on yourself if you don't comply. So comply with the officers. Let us do the work on the back end to get the case taken care of.